Okay, so don't let it be said I didn't warn you about this video. First thing I did is I sprayed my pages with the Krylon Matte Finish Spray and let them dry really completely. This won't waterproof your page, but it will help you have a fighting chance of not letting things bleed through thin journal pages. I'm trying to figure out a color scheme. You saw what I'm going to base this off of, and so I wanted to use some of these chipboard and die cut pieces, so I was using them for color choices because I didn't have the same colors that she used because I don't have those sprays. So once I figured out that I want what colors I wanted to use, I used Twisted Citron, and I did pull out peeled paint and use it, but then I went back with something darker later. But a lot of fidgeting. This is how I store my foams for my ink. With the thin journal papers, you have to do really thin layers. So you can't go, see my shaking? I fixed that, I promise, for the next video. You can't go in really heavy and thick right from the beginning. You have to kind of do it in layers and let it dry, in layers and let it dry, especially if you want to coat the whole thing. If you go in really heavy with, especially with darker colors, it's going to bleed through simply because the matte finish doesn't waterproof your page, because if it did, nothing would stick to it. But if you go in with lighter layers and then dry it in between, either with air drying or drying it with your heat gun, you can do quite a bit of layering of ink. You can put quite a bit of watercolor or that kind of stuff on it as long as you dry it in between. And I'm terrible about remembering to use these kind of something behind the page, and then I end up with it all over all the pages behind it. Not because it bled through, but because I'm terrible and I go off the edges. So, yep, you just got to kind of hang on to it. And any wrinkles or any of that kind of stuff that gets into them, don't worry about that. It will all flatten out. Dry everything really good. Here we are going in for more. And it looks a little blotchy and that kind of stuff. If you keep going with another layer of your color, if you want it perfectly solid, you can get it perfectly solid. I just didn't care if it was perfectly solid this time. So I think I changed to Mowed Lawn instead of Teal Paint, I think was the other color. It was more close, this was closer to the color that Vicky used in hers, and we're just loosely doing this. But like I said, the more, you don't have to dry it like 100%, you just have to make sure that it's not so wet that it just pulls the color into the paper. So I probably dried them with a heat gun, maybe a minute in between colors and in between layers. But you just add some color and blendy blend and go back and add some more color and blendy blend and dry in between. And you'll get a feel of it on the lighter paper. But the biggest trick is to spray it with the matte finish first, and then make sure that you let it dry. And what I was trying to show was that it's really wet there, and so you want to, you want to dry it. So like I went in with a baby wipe with a stencil, which you can do, and it won't bleed through, as you can see. But if I let it dry, air dry there, it will bleed through. Okay, so like I said, you can add, do stenciling with wet medium like the baby wipe, but you have to do a little bit, dry it, do a little bit, dry it again, do a little bit, dry it. It doesn't have to be 100% dry. You just don't want puddles to be soaking, air drying on your page. So if I let this air dry, there is a chance that wherever the baby wipe left the most moisture, it could bleed through. So you just have to, it's thin journal paper, you have to work with the paper. But again, just dry in between. Probably if you don't have a heat gun, buy a heat gun. They're cheap and it's indispensable. But now I'm going to go back and I'm going to put some dark. And again, I'm pouncing lightly to stencil with this. You can stencil heavier with it, but I would dry in between when you stencil heavier. Like I wouldn't grind my stencil, my blending sponge into the paper. I hope this is working. This is my first time using the mic, so I'm so nervous, can you tell? All right, so we're gonna do some edging, and I went for pine needles, distress ink instead of distress oxide because I wanted more of a stark color. Oxides tend to leave it more opaque, so they add kind of a white to it, and I wanted more just straight up color. I'd have to say probably my favorite things to use in my thin paper journals are my distress inks, my distress oxides. I do love my Lyra pencils in them, and I do love my ink or crayons in them, and I do love my Inktense pencils in them. So, but you can see how dark this ink is, and I think I flip it over here in a little bit when I dry it. I was really bad about not showing the back, but it didn't bleed through at all. Any of the stuff that I did to the page didn't bleed through. The more layers you get on your page, the more bleed proof it becomes also, because you have all of those layers of ink between whatever you're doing and the page. And so like if you're gonna stamp with a dark color and you're not going to put any colors down below, it probably won't bleed depending on how much ink you have and how long you leave the stamp on the page, but it will shadow. But I don't mind if it shadows, I just don't want it to bleed through, but shadowing doesn't bother me. But real rough ink edging there, and then pulling out the heat gun again. I hate this sprayer. I don't know why everybody says, oh, this sprayer is so great. I hate it. I have had the most trouble with it. Every time I spray with it, I either get globs or I get spritz that doesn't work. And then the cap doesn't stay tight. So this is the last time I used it. I pitched it right after this video because it's terrible. So anyways, I want to do some spritzies, and I ended up with these big things, but don't worry, it'll go away. Lots of drying. You have to do lots of drying, more drying. Don't let it set. Don't let it set, or it'll bleed through. And then I had this, I don't know, it looked like a evergreen bough. I don't even know, it's a generic stamp. And so I'm going to stamp with pine needles, and again, because I have so many layers, I'm not worried about it stamping and bleeding through. If I was to stamp with this color on a plain page without anything under it, it will bleed right through. Oxides seem to bleed worse than distress inks for some weird reason. But I started out just going around the top, and I don't think I videoed it, but at the end I went all the way around with this. Hers was just at the top because she had ornaments hanging, but I wasn't going to do the ornaments, so I just did it across the top. Well, I went back and did it across the bottom, but you'll see at the end. Alright, so now we're going to do splatters and splats and splatters, which is my favorite part, because when I hate the background, because right at this moment I'm like, oh my god, how do I get rid of those light marks? You add splatter and they go away. And splatters nicely go all over everything, but you gotta love splatters, right? So anyways, I put a whole bunch of splits and splats of the pine needles on there, and again, you got to dry, and this time you need to dry it till it's completely dry, or those big blobs will bleed through. And then she used gold to stamp on her page, and I'm just going to use it in the background and use it for splatters. Is kind of a twinkly lights in the tree kind of thing. I don't know, it sounded good in my head. So anyways, we're just about done here. All that I've got left is to put the splatters on and get it going really goopy. I'm just checking its opacity there, and splat, gold, and yay, guess what? Yep, heat gun. Dry it all really good. So here's some pictures of how it turned out. I really appreciate you guys watching. I know this video was really rough, but I promise that I will get better, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much. Talk to you later. Bye.